Hey, hello everybody. My name's Scott Poole, and we're doing that, like Carolyn said, developing cost and pricing proposals today. So a little bit of the agenda. I'll talk a little bit about me, who we are as a small business development center. We'll look at costs, the direct, indirect, and unallowable costs. Take a look at where to find some opportunities on SAM.gov. And then at the final, we'll do a post-award debriefing of the officers, how to request for one. So first of all, a little bit about me. I've been working with various government contractors since 1990. I teach government contracting, pricing, finance courses at one of the local universities. And prior to working with government contractors, I worked in a commercial bank. Now about us, we're a resource partner for the Small Business Administration. We have 21 centers across the state, and we offer individual confidential counseling at no cost to our clients. All our consultants are highly trained with existing companies or startup companies. We're with all of them. Some of our areas are business plans, fiscal and operations management, financing options, marketing strategies, human resources, and many more. We also conduct education workshops and webinars like we have one today. And our specialized services include exporting, technology commercialization, veteran business assistance, minority outreach, and government contracting. So first of all, cost and price. Cost is the monetary measure of the capital and our resources required to complete the contract. You have direct costs such as labor and other direct costs such as materials and travel. But you also have to load on those your indirect costs. You'll develop a fringe benefit rate, an overhead rate, a general administrative rate. Now, when we go to the price, it's taking all these costs plus any fee or profit applicable to the contract type. You can see different contract types and fees on FAR. This is the Federal Acquisition Regulation 15.401. Now, let's go to the next slide here. A direct cost is any cost that's identified specifically with a particular final cost objectives, like saying that's labor, materials, travel, excuse me. So you might have, as part of the contract, says, hey, move a certain items from part A to part B. And that'd be a direct cost because you're physically doing something at the contract. Now, indirect costs is any cost not directly identified with a single final cost objective, but it might be with two or more of these final costs, where you're having maybe an overhead manager that's not really touching the contract any, but supervising over a certain amount of people. And general administrative costs. These are costs for the company as a whole, maybe the president's salary, the chief financial officer's salary, rent, certain things of that nature. And there's also unallowable costs. Now, unallowable costs, if it cannot meet the criteria of allowability, reasonableness, and allocability, it's unallowable. Also, certain contracts, when you're awarded with them, they might say, hey, even we're going to make this one unallowable. You can't charge us directly for this one. Now, what I do here, all these are coming through with a FAR 31. And the FAR, the Federal Acquisition Regulation, here's one of the screens. I like to go to acquisitions.gov. It gives a complete listing of the FAR. And the FAR is, you look at it at Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulation, but it's really only one, but it has a lot of separate subparts. You see there's 1 through 53 on this one here. So determine allowability. You see that this is for 31-201-2. Now you have certain things that are coming along here. And when you look at this, you'll see 31. This one's right here. That's the part. That's part 31 of those lists that we're looking at. The next item, you see .2. So 31.2, that's the subpar. And then you see 01. This 01, this section here, is a certain section. And then -2, that's the subsection for some of these items. Clear that. So a cost is allowable only when the cost complies with all the following. You're going to look at reasonableness, allocability, standards with the cost accounting standard boards, if applicable. Otherwise, it's generally accepted accounting principles and practices that are appropriate to the circumstance. You have one of the ones, like I say, the terms in the contract. Now, determine reasonableness. Again, another section at the FAR. A cost is reasonable if it is in nature and amount, it doesn't exceed that which be incurred by a prudent person in the conduct of a competitive business. So what is reasonable? It depends on a variety of considerations and circumstances. You see, whether it's the type of cost generally recognized as ordinary and necessary for the conduct of the contractor's business or contract performance, and if it's generally accepted sound business practices. You have arm's length bargaining and different state and federal regulations. Also, it's contractor's responsibility to the government, other customers, the owners of the business, the employees, and the public at large. And finally, it looks at any significant deviations from the contractor's established practices. Now, allocability. A cost is allocable if it's assignable or chargeable to one or more of the cost objectives on the basis of the relative benefits received or an other equitable relationship. So that's subject to the foregoing. The cost is allocable to a government contract if it's incurred specifically for that contract, if the benefits both the contract and other work, and it can be distribute them in a reasonable proportion to those benefits received, or it's necessary for the overall operations of the business, although a direct relationship to any particular cost objective cannot be shown. So we're looking at that for the direct costs. That's easy. Here's the contract. It says you're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. But for the indirect weights, you need to allocate them. And you're going to put these together in one. You have the expense pool. Expense pool, where you're putting it, it's itemized in your accounting system. You have a general ledger with certain general ledger numbers that are grouping these costs together. Like for fringe, that might be health insurance, your 401k, paid time off, etc. Look at overhead. Overhead could be at the corporate site. You're looking at overhead labor, rent, depreciation, and also the applied fringe that's associated with the overhead labor. Overhead, that's on the client site. And that could be, sometimes you get a government contract, and they say, we want you to work at our installation. So now that one's going to be a little bit lower because you're not going to have fringe depreciation there, but you will have labor, maybe travel, and the applied fringe on that overhead labor. And finally, general administrative. You have that type of labor, like say the president, CFO, COO type of folks. And also there's B&P labor, that's bid and proposals. When you're looking at this and you're finding a government contract and you're setting this up in your system, you might set these up as a certain project. So it's capturing all the different related costs in there. And so you say, hey, we're bidding on this proposal, and it took us $10,000 to do this one, maybe 20,000. So it captures all that. So you're going to take the B&P, and if it's done, press the fringe, and then you also have to add the overhead to that one as well. Now you have all those costs and all those separate pools, separate expense pools. Now you're going to allocate them, the base, and in each one of these, we're taking the expense pool, divide by the base. Now for fringe, you're going to take the total labor. That's the direct labor on the contracts. It's the overhead labor, as the general administrative labor, any B&P labor. Now, excuse me. So the base for the overhead on the corporate side is all the contracts that have the direct labor that were done on the corporate side here. And you're going to take that direct labor plus the applied fringe. Same thing with the on-site. The direct labor plus the associated fringe go with that. Now, when you get to general administrative, the base for that is the total cost input. So that's all the cost less the G&A expense that we see in the pool above. Now here's some examples. I had one expense pool. The fringe was $3,946,007. The allocation base for this one was $10,517,230. So that gave an fringe rate of 37.52%. Same thing looking at the overhead for a corporate side and client side here and G&A. That gave us the rates of 37.52, 33.52, 803, and 6.99 respectively. So I could then build up some here. I say, okay, here's my direct labor. Employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And their direct labor rate, I'm just going to take their salary and divide it by 2080. You see I have various ones here. And then I'm going to go, here's the overhead rates, the fringe, overhead, and G&A for this one. This particular contract just happened to be worked at using the overhead from the corporate side. So you're going to take these, you could build up your burden rate from that. So you see, start out with the direct labor rate, and you add in all the fringe, overhead, and G&A, and you get the burden rate. So this one happened to be $70.84. Now, if the fee on this one was 8%, then you can multiply 70.84 times 1.08, and you get a loaded rate of 76.51. And if everybody's getting 2,000 hours, that'll equate to all the price then here. So the price for the labor was $744,638.40. Now, in some contracts, you'll see where it's okay to put your direct cost in, load it all up, and multiply this. But a lot of them are saying, okay, for the materials, for travel, for the all non-labor type of costs. Sometimes they're saying you just do this with a pass-through, but most you do is load your G&A rate on this. So if the materials comes $50,000, you multiply it by the 6.99, add that all together, and that comes through as that pass-through. So that gives a grand total for this one of 803, 482.40. Now that's just building up these costs. But where do we find those opportunities to do so? So we want to go on what's called SAM.gov, the System for Award Management. So it's another official site of the US government, and it's no cost to sign up for this. But if you want to do business with the federal government, you got to be able to register on SAM.gov. But you could do the same thing that we went through for the cost, whether you're doing this at the state level, through for the state of South Carolina through SCBO, or you might be doing it at a county, or you might be doing it individual with the city. Doing the cost involved in this and the buildup for the price is all the same. Now again, on SAM.gov, you come here, say you'll get started. And once you get started, you get signed up. Then you come and you can do a search. You can search right here. And I'm going to come and I could click this plus sign. When I do that, I'll get contract opportunities, assisted living, any information. And so I'm going to pick contract opportunities. And when you go contract opportunities, there's a whole array that you could look for. You could say, okay, I want to look for the opportunities based on federal organizations, dates, the notice types, the product or service information, set-asides, place of performance, contract awardees. You could take a look, you could see who has what had winnings. Maybe you have a certain NAICS code when you sign up here. That's the North American Industrial Classification System. And so you say, okay, they have a award. You search out folks here and say, maybe you could even do a subcontract with them on a future proposal. Let's go down and let's see, I'll say on the notice type, I'm going to search for solicitations. And the NAICS code, I'm going to use NAICS code, it's NAICS code 541330, and that's for engineering services. Now, when you see this, you're looking for, there's different ones. You can have an RFP, a request for proposal. You have a RFQ, a request for quote. Sometimes you'll see an RFI, where it's a request for information. Sometimes you'll be seeing things as the sources sought, where the government's doing their marketing research and say, hey, well, I'm looking at firms. Can you do this? And these are the kind of an ideal thing that you send like your corporate capability statement to the contract officer. And if you get, like, say, 2 women-owned small businesses, they could say, well, we could do this as a set-aside for a small business that just has that certification. But if we look at a request for proposal, and in accordance with, again, FAR 15.203, the government's requirement, the terms and conditions, the instructions, and the evaluation criteria. What are the factors? What's of the relative importance here? So when you see this, it's absolutely critical to perform a complete and thorough review of this solicitation. You want to know what is being asked. How well is the request defined? What is explicitly stating? What holes, opportunities need clarification? And this solicitation ought only include those requirements that are absolutely necessary for success. So when you go on here, you find one and you look it up and you're saying, okay, well, first of all, I see this solicitation, and this one here I just pulled, it was an old one. You'll see the date it had to be due by 2 p.m. This was February 28th, 2018. You see the solicitation number. You see that it's a negotiated RFP. The one you're seeing above here is information for bid, and it gives you the date issued. And then it has a lot of parts in here. You see there's parts A through H on this side, and you have parts I through M on this side. Now, when we look at a solicitation like this, it's always good to go to the instructions, conditions, and notices to the officers on section L. Because this is telling you the proposal that you're going to write, what you're going to need for the business proposal, including the cost proposal that you're building up, the narrative that's going along, saying that narrative to include how did you build your indirect rates and things of this nature. What kind of fringe benefits do you offer? So the government knows what they're paying for here. Now below this one, there's a section here that the offer must fulfill. Now if we look at this, there's certain things that it'll ask you. This has to be in compliance. The officer agrees that is offered. It'll say, hey, well, what's going to be? It's going to be 60 days, calendar days, unless a different period is inserted by the offerer. So sometimes, they'll say, hey, there might be a lot of folks here, say, keep this going for 270 days that you have this bid. And what it's telling them, they can come through, they'll look at that and say, well, you agreed to keep this price. It is. Your indirects might have gone up a little bit during that time, but you agreed to charges at this one. And what you have here in this section, there'll be certain amendments that are coming out with the dates. You want to make sure that you grab all those amendments that are coming through here. So the solicitation, before you submit this form, you'll put in your name, address, your code, facility, the person that's authorized to sign the offer, and then it'll actually put the number, do the signature, and the offer date. So if you do win this award, then the government comes back with this section right here. And then you'll have a contract. And this contract here, it'll change a little bit. You'll see you'll have a contract number in this section now. And it'd be good, then get started. Let's look at those different sections. Now, section A, that's the solicitation contract form. That tells you the proposal due date, delivery point, and if there's any defense priorities and allocation system grading, it'll show on there too. But that's for special cases. Section B, it's the supplies or services and the price cost. Now that's outlining the specific quantities of these items. What are the supplies, the services to be purchased? And it's outlined per the contract type in the contract line item. So in the CLIN, you'll see some have CLINs, sub-CLINs. It gets a little bit sometimes daunting, but not too bad. Section C is the description, the specifications. It's the work statement, statement of work. It defines the what. Say, okay, what's going to be delivered and what's we're going to purchase. And so it lays it out. Are you able to do this? And you write your technical report to that section C, in your proposal. Section D is the packaging and marketing. If there's any specific packaging and label requirements, look at that section where it'll have it laid out for you. Section E, inspection and acceptance. Looks like I got this twice here. Contract data administration is actually the administration data that goes through the contract here. Need to update that slide, sorry about that. But when you go section F, deliveries and performance, and then that's when you're defining the expected delivery schedule and location. So some of these things, you get into these contracts and the government says, hey, well, I need this at a certain delivery time and at this location. So you agree to do that. And sometimes you're dealing with subcontractors, and maybe subcontractors are dealing with a certain special, trying to get this thing for this certain delayed. The government is not going to come to them, they're going to come to you and say, why isn't it here? Section 8 is the special contract requirements. And this is anything that's not defined elsewhere in solicitation. Section I are the contract clauses. It defines the terms and conditions, generally only in reference form. These are the things that you're seeing in the bar that were shown earlier here. So be sure to read the original and full text of any cost price implication, the labor laws, the taxes, overtime provisions. Are there something like, is this a contract subject to the Service Contract Act? We're saying, okay, well, got here, where you got to say, well, I'm going to go into this one area, and I think I could get this person for maybe $30 an hour. Well, under the service contract, that one might be said, hey, you got to pay him at least $40 an hour. So there are certain things that you got to add. So you need to know specifically what these contract clauses are stating. Section J is the list of attachments. Again, you want to look at each attachment to assess the impact to your technical schedule. There might be certain labor requirements, might have a DD 253 or different reference documents here that you're going to be looking at. And it might have some attachments that say, hey, fill out the cost using these schedules. We need these schedules to be included when you submit your proposal to us. Section K, again, is the representations, certifications, and other statement officers are quote. So what's the impact of these clauses that you're certifying? One of these things, when you're signing up on SAM.gov, there's a lot of reference certs that you put in there that you're signing to. Section L. Again, this is an important one to look at because you need the instructions, conditions, and notices. So we want to know the content, the format, the number of copies, and packaging requirements for each volume. So it might be you're going here and I've seen them, they say, hey, it has to be a certain font, 10 point whatever, and number of copies. It says you gotta have at least the original and 3 copies submitted here. The content, there might be a page requirements for this. Say, don't go over, I say 30 pages, whatever the condition might be. And then section F, we're looking at these, and this is the evaluation factors for award. So it's telling you the importance of the cost price compared to other proposed volumes. So you're going here, like say, when your technical proposal, you might have a technical proposal that says, okay, well, we're putting a 25% weight on the technical proposals. So when you're submitting your proposal to the government, one section goes off to technical folks, the other one's going off to the cost folks. And so they're looking at these and cost, let's say cost in section M, they say that's worth 25%. And then you go to past performance. Now, past performance might be 50%. So they're putting a lot of weight on past performance. And these could change. It might some be more emphasis on cost, some more emphasis on technical, but past performance is critical as well. Because they want to look at here, they want to say, have you done this before? Were you successful? Did you have the contract taken away from you? Tell us a little bit about that if it happened. And so you want to keep those in mind. So it's section A through M that you're looking at here in those solicitations. And finally, when you go through the award, you say sometimes the people that are unsuccessful, even sometimes the one that won the award, they could request a debriefing of the officers. So again, this is going back, and this is FAR 15.506. There are certain rules that apply to this. So an officer, when it's a written request received by the agency, it has to be 3 days after the date they received notice of contract award. And then to the maximum extent practicable, debriefing should occur 5 days after the receipt of that notice. Now, the officer that was notified is exclusion from the competition, but failed to submit a timely request that is not entered into a debriefing. So these have to be a certain timeline, and there's certain things that the government is going to be telling you about. And it doesn't matter, these debriefings, they could be done orally. You might have a phone call, a Zoom meeting, or it might be in writing, or any other method acceptable to the contracting officer. So the contracting officer should normally chair any debriefing session held. So, and individuals that helped out with the evaluation should provide support as well to this debriefing. But at a minimum, you'll find the government's evaluation of significant weaknesses or deficiencies in the officer's proposal, if applicable. And you're not doing this all together, they're coming individually to you. Now, the overall individual cost or price and technical rating of the successful offer and the debrief offerer, and the past performance of the debrief offerer. So the overall ranking of all offers says, hey, here's one here, you came in second place, or you were in third. So it'll give you a summary for the rationale for why they made that award. So reasonable responses, the relevant questions, so you want to put those together if you can. But also, the debriefing is not going to include a point-by-point comparison of the debrief officer's proposal with those of the other officers. That won't happen. It's going to be a general. The debriefing will not reveal any information prohibited from disclosure in 24.202 or exempt from release under the Freedom of Information Act. So you're not going to get trade secrets, privilege, or confidential information, commercial or financial information, the names of individuals providing reference. So it's not going to be, like I say, a point-by-point debriefing, but it's going to give you a general idea of what happened during this solicitation. And this is just a little brief idea of what's happening here, building your costs here, looking over for opportunities on SAM.gov. But like I say, it doesn't have to be federal. You could take these same thing as far as the costing of it and pricing, and you could apply those to anything. Like if you're going through, like I say, the state of South Carolina, or maybe one of the counties or the cities as well. And that's pretty much it for today. Did you have any questions at this point?
Scott, we do have some questions, so I will go ahead. They're in the chat. And if anyone, as I ask the question. If that person would like to unmute themselves, they certainly can and add anything to it. So the LK328 ask if you are looking at a set aside for a WOSB, will it have all these sections?
Yes, yes, it will. If it's a set aside for this one here, but the nice thing about it, you could have some folks that are, hey, that's my NAICS code. I could do this. I'm a small business. But if it's set aside for a woman-owned small business, those are the only companies that could bid on that contract. But yes, you'll have the same type of thing. It's a little bit less if it's a request for quote, but request for proposal a little bit more involved.
Did you have any more questions for Scott?
No, that answers my question. Thank you.
And can you share your full name so we can get your attendance?
You have it there. It's Linda Klingman, HR Coastal.
Okay, thank you so much. All righty,
Thank you.
my pleasure. So the next one is from Nima. I want to get a minority certificate. Contact some local organizations for help, but no one helped. Can you help me with the information? And I know the answer to that is yes. Our government contracting specialists throughout the state can certainly assist with getting a minority certification. Would that be correct, Scott?
That's correct. And you have there's three of us, with our thing. You have Sherry Pittenger, she's in the upper state. You have Scott Bellows, he's in the Midlands. And you could have myself here too, and I'm in the Low Country, Charleston area.
So this person is located in the Greenville area, so that would be Sherry's contact information. Would you be able to share that, Scott?
I will. Let's see. Sherry Pittenger. Look at her right quick here. Let's see, and she's her email is spittin@clemson.edu.
It looks like she has already gotten your client file. So if you would like me to, I can transfer this information to her and ask her to reach out. All right. So the next one.
Phone number for her, it's 864-276-5560.
Thank you
so much.
No, you're quite welcome.
And I can email you that information as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, does any of the rest of this presentation cover pricing outside of government contracting?
You
So
could
if
use those. If we go through the definitions of what a direct cost is, the indirect, building up your indirect rates to apply, those are pretty basic. It doesn't matter. You could be doing a commercial contract, but with a commercial, you usually have a little bit higher profit, on some things. Like usually I've seen for cost plus fixed fees, for example, the government, it's usually around 7%. T&Ms maybe around 8 to 9%. And then you have fixed price. And it all depends. It might be 10 to 12% there. But when you go commercial, the sky's the limit here. It's whatever the buyer is willing to pay you for those. But you could use those basic things to build those up. And so you can see the profitability that you're going to be making on this.
Beth, did you have anything to add to your question?
Oh, no, ma'am. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All righty. So Robert sent has sent out all of Sherry's information. Thank you, Robert. Does government contracting need both bonding and liability insurance?
Yes, when you're going through, some of the solicitation will say, it depending on what type of work you're gonna do, you might have to have certain bonding insurance or different liabilities. Sometimes you're asking, they'll be put on, include me as a rider on your insurance policy. Or what your bonding might be, say, hey, you need $2 million coverage on this one, for an example. But that, yes, you do. Depending on the contract.
Thank you again. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, here's another one. I would like a more in-depth breakdown of pricing for a proposal or RFQ. I get so overwhelmed and freeze with each proposal I find. So let's see, Tawanda, where are you located? Because I know that if you're in our area, I know that Scott would be more than happy to assist.
Absolutely.
Tawanda, Miss Cummings, did you have anything to add to that question?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm in Somerville. I've done
Okay.
a few subcontracting opportunities through the city of Charleston via a construction company. But I mean, that was kind of a known connection, you know? So as far as submitting actual proposal, when I see them, it just seems like it's so much and I get so overwhelmed, and then I think I underbid because I don't want to overbid. So I think I just need some guidance and assistance on actually completing a proposal or RFQ.
So Scott, we have her in the system. She is in our area. This is East Coast Blasting LLC. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. Scott, I will forward you her information. Scott's not in the office today. He's doing this presentation remote, but I will forward this to you, Scott, so you can possibly schedule an appointment.
Thank you so much.
That sounds great. And you made a good point there. You know, some folks when they're bidding on contracts, they'll, oh, I want to win this one. It might be a fixed price contract. Yeah, let's say it's a fixed price contract for, and you come up, well, I think I might undercut a little bit here. So I'm going to bid $90,000 and end up, you know, that you're going to have to pay like $110,000. If that's a fixed price contract, that's the difference that you eat up in profit or at a loss. So it's a very good, when you're making those, you don't want to underbid them. Of course, you don't want to overbid, like you were saying, and say, hey, this took me out of the competitive range, so they're not going to look at mine. But sometimes the government does. They go, they might look at something, say the lowest price, technically acceptable type of contracts. They might have, it's going to be for the benefit of the government, whatever they pick. Some folks say, hey, well, I know my price was under the one that won. So why did the government pick them instead of me? So there's different factors that they're looking at before they're making that award.
Thank you.
So there is another, I agree that the proposals seem overwhelming, 85 to 125 pages. Is it all considered A through M?
Well, it all depends on what you're going through. On a typical RFP, request for proposal, it usually has those sections. All right, and it might be a little daunting the first one you do, but after a while it becomes second nature. I said, yeah, we know this thing. Yeah, section B, I'm gonna put items in here. I want to look at section L to see what the instructions are, basically, and also section M to say, hey, how's this going to be awarded? And so those are two of the starting points for those. But you might have a request for a quote. And a request for a quote is not that much going in here. So it's a little bit different depending on what you have. But if you're looking at one, and whether it's a request for a quote, it's a request for a proposal, if you want to send it to me, we can look at it together.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have a question, or would you like to unmute and share anything with Scott today? Robert, Scott, do you have anything else to share with our audience today?
No, I don't. I just appreciate everybody for attending.
Robert?
Just thank you for attending.
So everyone, we will, Robert, more than likely than myself, will be sending out a post-event survey. So very quick questions. It asks you if this information was helpful, how you found out about us, things like that. If you could please respond to that post-event survey, those people that respond will be receiving the slide deck as well as a link to view the recording on YouTube. And that will be distributed probably within about a week. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We certainly appreciate it, and we're going to end this session now.